Well, greetings once again from snowy Cooperstown, New York, and welcome to the latest in our series of virtual curator spotlights, the starting nines that we're featuring here at the Hall of Fame. We thank you for joining us today. Happens to be the day of the Hall of Fame election. That news will be coming out tonight shortly after 6 p.m. Eastern Time on both the MLB Network. We'll also be announcing it on Facebook as well, so we're looking forward to that. In the meantime, though, we are going to talk about artifacts from teams in the National League East with our senior curator, Tom Seaver. And before we get to Tom, though, we do want to take a moment to thank our generous sponsor, the Ford Motor Company. They are sponsoring all of these live public programs during the course of 2021. So we thank Ford Motor Company for doing that for us. Today, our focus will be on the National League East. We are joined by Tom Seaver, longtime follower of baseball, fan of the St. Louis Cardinals. Today, though, his focus will be on the teams in the NL East, the Mets and the Phillies, the Braves, all the rest. We'll look at all those clubs. We will highlight two artifacts from each team, talk about the artifacts, how we got them, and we'll reveal exactly where they are in the museum. Welcome, Tom. Thanks for joining us. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. It's kind of, I can look at my window here. It's snowing pretty well out there. So, but you know what? I'm stuck in my house anyway. So what am I going to do?
That it is. This is January weather. It's hard to believe spring training, or at least the scheduled start of spring training, is just a couple of weeks away. Tom, we're going to look at artifacts from all of the teams in the National League's Eastern Division. Later, we'll take questions for Tom Seaver. We do this alphabetically, team by team. So we'll start with the Atlanta Braves franchise. And we start with an artifact that, well, in a very unfortunate way, is timely. This is the uniform that belonged to the great Hank Aaron. Henry Aaron passed away on Friday, died in his sleep at the age of 86. Not only one of the greatest players of all time, but one of the great gentlemen, a man of dignity, a man of kind of a reserved nature. He was the opposite of a braggart or a boastful player. If you listen to him, you'd never get the idea at just how great he was, not only at hitting home runs, but doing everything on the field, hitting for average, hitting for power, ran the bases well, played the outfield very well, and also provided quiet leadership to those teams in Milwaukee and Atlanta. So, Tom, we'll begin with this jersey for Hank Aaron. It is from the 1974 season, and my understanding is that it also is from the game in which he broke the Babe's record. Tell us more about it.
Right. He was wearing this very jersey, which is currently in actually two exhibits. It's in both the Chasing the Dream exhibit, which is about Hank Aaron, as well as our One for the Books exhibit about baseball records. It actually is in a case that you can view from either side. So it's in, I guess it's fair to say it's the only artifact that is in two exhibits at once, which is, you might think it's a hard thing to do, but we managed to pull that off. But it's the jersey he wore when he got his 715th career home run. Obviously kind of an off the charts historic moment. And remember, he went on to hit another 40 homers. It's not like he was done. So that he set the record at 755, and that has since been broken. But iconic numbers: 714, 715, 755, numbers that make you immediately think of the greatness of Hank Aaron. And I'm so glad, Bruce, that you talked about all the different things that Hank could do, because it always kind of irks me when I hear someone say, well, what a great slugger. And they're right, but they often just stop right there, and it really misses the greatness of Hank Aaron. First and foremost, personally, I think the consistency it's hard to be a more consistent, reliable individual on the field than Hank Aaron. And he was a great batter. I mean, forget the home runs, and you've heard it a bunch of times, but I still think it's a fun statistic that if you took away all 755 home runs from Hank Aaron, pretend he never hit a home run, he'd still have over 3,000 hits. I mean, the guy was just incredibly consistent. Great all-around player.
One of the things that I've encouraged people to do on my Facebook page is to watch video of him at YouTube. And you'll see some things that are interesting. He was unorthodox. He hit off his front foot.
Right.
He and Clemente both did that. That's not the way they teach it. That's not the textbook style, but it certainly worked for Hank Aaron.
Yeah, you get this.
He had those incredibly strong wrists that he was able to turn over to help him generate this kind of consistent power. It's just unfortunate we don't have more of his at-bats on tape. We think of a player today like a Mike Trout. There is an archive of probably every at-bat that he has had for the Los Angeles Angels since he came up. Because of when Hank Aaron played back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we only have selected moments. But those moments that are out there, that are on the YouTube channel, we also have video and film in our collection. And it's those are treasured highlights, in my opinion, probably anybody's opinion, to have a chance to see those. Tom, I'm curious, when we got this jersey, I assume we got it directly from Hank Aaron himself, but do you know exactly or even roughly when we were able to acquire this?
It was actually well after he had retired. So it did not come in, a lot of times we get artifacts that come in from just moments after or days after an event occurred. But this came in a number of years later. I think it's funny that you mentioned the unorthodox style. He really did hit off his front foot like Clemente. And, it's really tough when you got a kid and you say, look at Clemente, he's great. Look at Aaron, he's great. Don't do what they did. It's sort of a bummer to say that. But one neat thing that I think has eluded a lot of people, Hank Aaron was nearing the end of his career when this occurred, but he was still an incredibly valuable ball player, great a member of the Braves, an important member of the Braves still. But I took a look at it, and his first 6 home runs of that 74 season, the first one, of course, tied Babe Ruth's mark at 714. Then the second one was this one for number 715. But of the first 6 homers of the year, in other words, it's actually all homers that he hit in April. He put 6 homers in April. Let me think of this. I'm going to look at these numbers again here. Actually, let me retake that. The first 6 homers, all but the last homer of that month. But his first 6 homers, each one either tied the score, broke a tie, or took the team from being behind to ahead. And in other words, every one of those first 6 homers he hit was a consequential home run. 6 in a row. I mean, it's not like he's just like hitting homers at a random time in the game doesn't really mean anything. Every one of them was a meaningful home run.
You look at this uniform here, and this was a very distinctive design the Braves used only for a few seasons. I want to say they started this in 1972. They wore these uniforms in 72, 3, and 4, I think in 75. And then they made a switch to a pinstripe, I believe, in 1976, when Ted Turner took over the franchise. So when you see this uniform, you think of that era, but you also think of Hank Aaron as well.
Right. I think you nailed that right. I think it's 72 to 75 is when they wore this style, and then they kind of riffed off of it starting in 76. The road uniform still had this sort of 2-tone sleeves and the feather motif on the sleeves. But interestingly, though, the back, and I'm not going to be able to nail the dates, but I think in 72, the numbers on the back looked one way, and then in 73, there was a different style, or it might have been 73 or 74. So if you just look at the fronts, for a number of years, it looks the same, but they actually changed the style of the numbers on the back. And I'm pretty sure, I think it started in either 73 or 74, this different style on the back.
Another thing, Tom, that jumps out at me, this jersey looks pristine. I mean, it looks so clean. You think about it, all the people that were grabbing and tearing at this uniform after this historic home run, and it looks like it's untouched.
Well, I think it's been washed a lot. A lot of times we get jerseys right after an event, and listen. It's great when there's it looks used because it is used. So I think that's wonderful when that happens. but he probably went on to use it a number of other games. I don't know. A lot of times you get rid of a jersey immediately, but that was, I believe, not the case with this. So I think it got washed a few times before we got it.
So we have both the jersey and we also have uniform pants from 1974, from that historic home run. And as Tom mentioned earlier, you can find it actually in two places. You can view it either from Chasing the Dream, the Hank Aaron room, or you can do it from One for the Books,
Right.
our records room, essentially. Well, it used to be called the records room, now One for the Books, which looks at the great records in baseball history. Hard to find a record with any more substance to it. And when you talk about the home run record, Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's mark, I remember growing up late 60s, early 70s, hearing for years that this was a record that would never be broken, and Hank Aaron proved all of the naysayers wrong. Not only did he do it, but he broke the record under enormous strain, death threats, racial insults, an incredible amount of bigotry, and somehow was able to overcome it and maintain that excellence both in 73 and in 74. We do want to talk about the other artifact that Tom has selected for the Atlanta Braves franchise. This is for David Justice. This Game 6 of the 1995 World Series. For those who don't remember, Tom, give us some of the details from that game.
Right. So it's October 28th, and David Justice is coming to bat in the bottom of the sixth. There's no score. It's a tight game, and the Braves have we got a 3-2 game lead, and Justice leads off the inning by hitting a solo home run off of Cleveland's Jim Poole, and it's 1-0, and the game ends 1-0. Tom Glavin was a pitcher for the Braves, and he was the World Series MVP that year. He was just very excellent, and just an iconic home run for a team that was so dominant for well over a decade. And but this was their only World Series championship they came away with, so it stands out even that much more. And of course, David Justice, who had earlier in the series complained a bit about Braves fans, and so they were very anti-Dave Justice, even though they're in the World Series. And you know what? He kind of shut him up, I guess, when he hit what turned out to be the only home run in that Game 6.
As you can see, the trademark toward the middle, clearly this is a Louisville Slugger from the Hillerick and Bradsby Company, a black bat. As I look at the barrel of the bat, Tom, it looks like you can really see the grain marks there. I don't know if that's an illusion or if that's what it really looks like.
No, you can. It's the ridges, the dip that they put on the bat, depending on how thick it is, the inherent grain of the wood can sometimes show through. The lighting is just sort of perfect for it to see it here, especially at the very end.
I imagine you've picked up this bat relatively light.
No, I haven't. Well, I mean, I picked it up a while ago in researching it, but I'm not a guru on how heavy and light bats. Every bat, it feels fairly similar to me, but I'm not swinging it around. Nobody's swinging it around anymore. It's a museum artifact. But if I could swing it, I would still miss a ball, Bruce. I'm not going to hit anything. So.
Oh, you're very modest. You were a big part of our Hall of Fame softball championship many years ago. But I digress.
That's a different Zoom.
Justice was a very good player for a long time. Also was a remarkably good clutch player. He came over to the New York Yankees in the middle of a season, played very well down the stretch and in the postseason, and obviously comes up with a game-winning home run to win the Braves their only World Series championship of the 1990s. This was a man who really rose up to the big occasion.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's really hard to top this moment. I mean, he was, you don't want to boil down a guy's career to a single moment. But unfortunately, a lot of times that's what happens. And if you got to be boiled down to one moment, that's a good one to focus on. So good for David Justice for pulling that off.
And Tom, where is this in the museum?
So that Justice bat is in our exhibit called Autumn Glory, which is about postseason baseball, obviously focusing on World Series baseball.
So if you check out the Autumn Glory World Series exhibit on the third floor, this is among the artifacts that you will find. Let's move on now from the Braves to the former Florida Marlins, now the Miami Marlins. And we'll begin with a pair of what look to be very well-worn, well-used shoes. And they belong to the current manager of the Milwaukee Brewers, who once played for the Marlins. Tom, tell us about the significance of these baseball spikes.
Right. So this is from Game 7 of the 97 World Series. Sorry, Cleveland Indians fans, we get back-to-back on you with losses in the World Series, but these were worn by Craig Counsell, who scored the winning run in the 10th inning. The 11th inning, actually, in the 11th inning, to walk it off. And that was actually a hit by Edgar Renteria. And Counsell came home and scored that winning run. It was just an incredibly exciting finish. And by the way, the line drive that Edgar Renteria hit with the bases loaded and 2 outs, by the way, was just barely tipped off of the pitcher, Charles Nagy's glove. So he almost caught that line drive, which would have meant end of inning where just go back and hit again. It just hit off of it. It would have been probably a very talked about moment, because it would have been a pretty great catch, because the ball was hit pretty hard up the middle. But what a lot of people forget is Counsell actually was integral in sending the game into extra innings, because in the 9th inning, the team was down 2-1. The Marlins were down 2-1, and they had a man on first and third, and with 1 out, and Counsell came up to bat, and he hit a long fly ball that was really he pretty much crushed it. And it was down the right field, not quite the right field line, but straightaway right field, a little bit to the line. And it ended up being a sacrifice fly. The runner on third, who was Moises Alou, scored to tie the game. But he hit it really well. I mean, Manny Ramirez went back and caught the ball on a pretty decent play. It wasn't impossible, but you never really know with Manny out there. And boy, if that ball had clanked off his glove, or he had not tracked it down, it's really possible that the runner on first, Charles Johnson, could have circled the bases and ended the game and the World Series. So Counsell had 2 great moments in the 9th and then in the 11th. It kind of reminds me a little bit a number of years later with David Freese, who had a important moment in the 9th and in extra innings for the Cardinals when they beat the Texas Rangers in the World Series.
As we look at these shoes, in contrast to the Aaron jersey, these shoes have not been cleaned. There's lots of dirt. Yeah. There's lots of stains. Give us kind of the curatorial perspective, if you will, Tom. Why do we keep the dirt? Why do we keep that natural look to the shoes rather than clean them off?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is the artifact is the entire item as it comes to us. And so if there's dirt on the knee of some pants or a stickum on the helmet. Speaking of Manny Ramirez, we've got a Manny Ramirez helmet with a lot of pine tar on it. That's part of that artifact. And so while we often say these are his shoes, there's more to it than just the shoes. That's the field there as well. Yeah. And that's, I think, very evocative. There is really no reason to clean it off as long as it is not going to be detrimental to the artifact. And we may have talked about this, Bruce, before, I can't recall, but there are times when we get objects where if we didn't do some work on them, then it would be a problem in terms of a conservation problem. It might actually harm the object. Specifically, one that comes to mind, because it's happened a number of times, is sometimes we get jerseys that smell a bit of champagne from World Series. That sometimes happens, right? That needs to be washed. Carefully, though, and we rather do it than have the clubhouse guy do it. Nothing against him, but he's washing for a different reason than we are. And so we'll do it carefully to make sure that alcohol doesn't comes out, because it can adversely affect the material.
I noticed, Tom, these shoes, the laces are tied. Is that typically how we store a pair of spikes? The laces would be tied?
You know what? I don't know if we have a consistent, if we're consistent on that. That's a great question, and I do not have an answer for you. Our collections people would know. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not aware of that.
All right, we can do a follow-up on that
Yeah.
later. Final question on this one, where it is. I'm going to guess it's in Autumn Glory, but I'm not sure that that's the right answer.
No, you got it. You got it, Bruce. It's yet another great World Series moment, iconic World Series moment, and so that's what they are, where they're going to be placed. They are placed.
Craig Counsell scoring the winning run in Game 7 of the '97 Fall Classic. Of course, now the manager, very successful manager for the Milwaukee Brewers.
Right.
We have a second artifact from the Marlins, and you have an idea of who it belongs to just by looking at the name. It's a jersey from the 2016 season. We don't really think of Ichiro Suzuki as a member of the Marlins, but he was there when he got a very important milestone.
Right. This is from August 7th of 2016. This is actually a road uniform. Marlins were playing in Colorado at the against the Colorado Rockies in Denver, and he got his 3,000th hit wearing this jersey. And the fun story about it is that going into the game, he's got 29.99. He comes up in the first inning, he strikes out, and then in the fourth inning, he comes up and he hits a hard one hopper up the middle, and the pitcher for the Rockies, Scott Oberg, and Scott had to jump pretty high up off the mound, but he knocked it down. It hits the glove, and it looks like he's snared it on one hop, but it actually clanks off the glove a bit, and Ichiro is obviously incredibly speedy. He's just tearing down the first base line, and Oberg scrambles around, manages to pick up the ball and fire it as hard as he can to first, and they get Ichiro out by really very close play by a hair. The umpire really took his time on calling out. But you think about it for a moment, there's one guy in that ballpark who was extremely happy with that call, and that had to be the official scorer. Because let's say he was safe. Yeah. The official scorer is like, well, is that an error or is that a single? And honestly, you could make a decent argument either way on it. And what a horrible job, or a horrible place to be, is to make that call on what might be somebody's 3,000th hit. So he was lucky, got off the hook. It was not a hit because, or an error because it was an out. And then in the seventh inning, Ichiro hits a triple. He crushed. Once again, a lot of people don't really realize how much power Ichiro had, but he hit the ball high off the right field wall, and he had a stand-up triple to make his 3,000th hit. Only guy, by the way, in Major League history to get his 3,000th hit on a triple.
Yeah. Now, throughout his career, he would typically wear his first name, Ichiro, on his uniform. Any idea why he did that?
He was known as Ichiro when he was in playing Nippon professional baseball in Japan for whatever it was, 8 or 9 years. His last name is Suzuki, or what we refer to as the last name is Suzuki, which is an extremely common name. Ichiro is actually not a super uncommon name, but so even in Japan, everyone just called him Ichiro. So it just translated over.
Yeah, I remember when he first joined the Mariners, he was called Ichiro. That's how graphics showed him. And then it seemed like toward the end of his career, they started using the full name more, but he always had the emphasis on the first name. Now, I know, Tom, that he has been a very generous donor to the Hall of Fame. He has a great interest in the museum. He's come here many times during the winter, during the off season. So I imagine he gave this jersey fairly quickly after this milestone.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well. You couldn't have said any better, Bruce. He is so generous to us, and he's come to the museum a number of times, and while he was a player, mostly really in the off season. And he's just very interested in baseball history, and he loves the organization. And it was very close with our former president, Jeff Idelson, and just a great guy, really.
You've taken him on a tour of the museum?
I have,
yeah. Very good. Ichiro, his 3,000th hit milestone for the Miami Marlins. I love the two-tone nature of the 51. I like that aspect of this jersey, along with, of course, the first name of Ichiro on the back. All right, let's switch
Bruce.
to a third team as we continue our tour of the starting 9 artifacts in the National League East. Sadly, this an artifact that belonged to another Hall of Famer we lost last year, the great Tom Seaver. I'll set the scene for this one. It was April 22nd, 1970. Seaver was wearing this cap when he was facing the San Diego Padres, who were only in their second year of existence. He completely dominated them that day. But tell us the real headline from this performance, if you will, Tom.
Well, Seaver tied a major league record that day, and he also set a major league record that day. So the record that he tied was most strikeouts in a 9-inning game. He had 19, and the reason I say 9-inning game is a lot of people overlook the record that was set by a guy named Tom Chaney of Washington, where he had 21 strikeouts in a 16-inning complete game victory. So that's most in a major league game of any length. Except I will give one other proviso here, and that is that Smokey Joe Williams in the old Negro Leagues, which are now considered a major league, he actually had a 27 strikeout game. And that can be, you can learn more about that if you go to our One for the Books exhibit. That was when they were playing the Kansas City Monarchs. I believe he was with Homestead Grays at that time and struck out 27 guys. So we don't want to overlook that. But in the otherwise all white major leagues, for better or worse, the record was Tom Chaney, 21 strikeouts in a 16-inning complete game victory. But Seaver gets 19 Ks, which had been done a few times before. But what's really amazing is the record that he set was that he struck out 10 players in a row, and it was the final 10 batters. He was getting stronger. And, you might want to say, gosh, and by the way, the final score was 2-1. It was a close game. And boy, if it had been a tie game, maybe he could have stretched his strikeout streak to 11 guys in a row, 12. Nobody was hitting a thing those last few innings.
I don't think we have a formal pitch count for the game. They have what's called a pitch count estimator. And striking out 19 batters over the course of 9 innings, that's a pretty sizable number of pitches. I would not be surprised if he threw 140, 150 plus pitches in this game.
Yeah, I don't know if they have a full television broadcast of it, and then we could just count it up. But the main thing that was impressive is just how he was just getting better and better as the game went on. And by the way, of those strikeouts that I was telling, well, I'll leave that. That's a different story. But anyway, yeah, he wins a game 2-1. Al Ferrara has the only run scored for the visiting Padres, and that was a solo homer. Cito Gaston was in that game too for the Padres, for the people who remember Cito as a great manager of the Blue Jays in the 90s.
I want to ask you a little bit about the cap itself. It's a wool cap, and like all major league caps of that era, it has the green underside on the bill. You can just see a little fragment of that green near the edge of the bill. I'm curious about caps, the way that they're made today versus the way that they were made back in the late 60s, early 70s. Is there a lot of difference? Are caps pretty much the same in terms of material, structure, or are there some differences?
Well, one difference is what you pointed out is that it used to be that green was the default color for that underside of the bill, and now it's a dark gray. That changed. I can't remember exactly when that changed, but I've always associated that green. That there's a specialty about that green, but that's gone now. These teams are wearing a gray, and sometimes that color varies a little bit, as I believe is the case. But that's one thing that's changed. But I'm sure there's other parts of the cap that have changed. I believe the material is a little bit more breathable. This is during the time period when there's the cap, the front of the crown of the cap is becoming a little more upright than it used to be. It used to be more form-fitting. You look at pictures in the 1920s and 30s, even 40s. It's a lot more of a dome that's more form-fitting. But it's become more and more upright because it does a better job of advertising a logo on the front, whether it's a team logo or maybe a company logo, because lots of people wear wear caps that advertise other things, and you're a walking billboard at that point.
Speaking of the logo here, the orange NY just pops out at you. It's just a beautiful contrast to the blue. And like so many of our artifacts, it is seemingly perfect condition.
Yeah, but it's worn. I mean, let's give some props to our photographer Milo Stewart Jr., who does an amazing job and makes things look really good, and without lying to anybody. But he's going to emphasize what we want to emphasize about the cap. But it's a worn cap, no problem with that.
So a cap from Tom Seaver. We have another Mets artifact. This not a cap, but a hard helmet. A little bit different. Here we see a logo that clearly has been kind of stuck on to the base part of the helmet. And if you look at the front of the bill, you'll see the name Knight. We know it's Ray Knight, 1986 World Series. Take it from there, Tom.
Yeah, this was on Ray Knight's head in the 86 World Series. And Ray Knight was, in fact, the World Series MVP that year. And interestingly, he had a pretty slow beginning to the World Series. Wasn't doing that great. But in Game 6, which is obviously an iconic game in World Series history, and Game 7, which is very well remembered, it was a really great game as well, and gave the ultimate victory to the Mets. He did really well. I mean, he was everywhere. So a lot of people think about Ray Knight running home and tying the game. Winning the game in the Game 6, and you think of Mookie Wilson and you think of Bill Buckner. But as Ray Knight rounds third and heads home, partway through the final 90 feet there, he reaches up and holds onto his helmet, not because it was coming off, but because he just can't believe that the massive turnaround the Mets pulled in that game, which is what everybody remembers. So that was a great moment in Game 6. But additionally, in Game 7, we have to remember that he's wearing this helmet when the game's close. It's tied 3-3 in the 7th inning, and Knight hits a leadoff home run off the Mets pitcher Calvin Schiraldi to put them ahead 4-3, a solo homer. And this helmet was there for that, and they never gave up the lead and went on to win the World Series. So it saw some important action in the memorable 86 World Series.
Somewhat of a controversial move after the season. Ray Knight became a free agent. The Mets, who thought they had a good young replacement, they actually did in Howard Johnson. They let Ray Knight go. And a lot of people felt that was one of the reasons why the Mets struggled to repeat the next couple of years. Not just because of what Knight did on the field, because of his leadership, his toughness. He was really a guy who brought some character, some gravitas to the team. Let me ask you, Tom, about that logo. And I don't know if is it taped on or is that Scotch tape over it? It's really weird. I've not seen many helmets like that.
It's a decal. And so it's peeling off, but that's what it is. It's a decal there.
Is that typical of helmets from the 80s, that they would use a decal rather than a printed logo right on the helmet?
Yeah, I think I don't believe that all teams did the same thing. And the Cubs were famous for actually having a felt C. It was a cotton material affixed to the front that was always just strange that they did that. It seemed quite unusual, but I think most teams did decals at that point. And now, of course, there's almost a 3-dimensional plastic version of logos on most, if not all, of the Major League helmets. So it's actually changed quite a bit.
Yeah. Also, is it common to have the name on the front of the bill of the helmet there?
No, not common, but the Mets use those Dymo labels either on the backs or on the fronts of their helmets for quite a while.
What do you call that machine that printed out the KNIGHT? What do you call that?
I call that a Dymo label. I don't know if I always thought that's what it was called. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just where I grew up. That term. I'm sure it must be the name of the manufacturer, but it's these little labels that you can it imprints in plastic. And then you peel it off and it sticks.
Yeah, I remember using a label maker like that. I didn't know that it had that particular name. Interesting.
Bruce, I'm looking it up on the fly because we have this technology here in my office. And the answer is the company's name is Dymo. and I don't know how long they're around, but they're still around. I'm sure they've advanced since the 1980s or when I was a kid in the 1970s playing around with them. But DYMO. So there's a free advertisement for the Dymo label people, I guess.
Very good. Now let's ask where this helmet is on exhibit right now.
You know what? Another one in Autumn Glory about our postseason and World Series exhibit.
We forgot also to mention, or I forgot to mention, on the Tom Seaver cap, is that in one for the books?
The Seaver cap is actually in a whole new ball game, which is our exhibit about baseball from 1970 on up. It's one of, as you might guess, since it's from 1970, April of 1970, it's one of the first objects you'll see when you walk into that room. But good guess, Bruce, because actually in one for the books, which is a totally logical place for that that artifact, we actually have the glove that Tom Seaver wore that day. So we got both artifacts, and we placed them in two different places because they make sense in two different places.
Very good. So yeah, Tom Seaver's cap and Ray Knight's helmet representing the New York Mets. Let's move from the Mets to the Philadelphia Phillies. And here's something very, very different. This goes back to the 19th century, 1895. And this is what is called a popularity trophy. Explain that and who it belonged to.
Yeah, so this is back then they would call this a loving cup because it's in the shape of a cup, and they were very often made of silver, and that top comes off, and you could actually put things in it if you wanted to. But it's a traditional form of a trophy, and it is from 1895. At the beginning of the season, the Phillies decided they would do a popularity contest, and they'd let people who came to the game vote on it if you bought a scorecard. Not a bad idea for selling some extra scorecards, I guess. And there's a little coupon in the scorecard, and you'd fill out the name of your favorite Philly, and you'd hand it in, and they kept tabs on it. And if you follow it through the papers, and I've researched this, throughout the season, they'd say, hey, here's the current standings of the popularity contest. And they had announced at the end of the year that the winner would get this silver loving cup, the very one that you're looking at there. This is about, well, let's do the math. It's over 125 years ago, Bruce. So long time ago. So it was given to Sam Thompson, a future Hall of Famer. But the funny thing is, he started very slow in the voting. After a couple of months, two months into the season, he's barely on the radar. He's in dead last amongst all the Phillies players. And then as the season goes on, he slowly starts moving up further and further. And then really in the last days of the season, he just takes off, and he ends up winning by, he had just over 8,100 ballots cast in his favor. And the second place popular Philly player, a guy named Lav Cross, he got just under 6,800. And in sixth place, by the way, in sixth place is future Hall of Famer Ed Delahanty, who batted over 400, but he's sixth place. Sam Thompson batted like 390 something, so I mean he did very well, but it's hard to believe how can you bat 400 and be like the sixth most popular Philly? But Delahanty managed to pull that off.
The material on this, Tom, is silver.
Yep, silver. It's absolutely beautiful. Come to the museum, please. It's in our exhibit called Taking the Field, which is about 19th century baseball, and yeah, it's a popularity contest that he won. And sometimes, you know, they've had popularity contests where guys got watches or various other things. And this one happened to be this really gorgeous loving cup. It's pretty big. It's like, I'm terrible about dimensions, but I want to say it's about 2 to 2.5 feet high, something like that. It's quite beautiful. And we recently had it carefully shined because silver will tarnish, of course, and it tends to look kind of a matte finish, but boy, when you shine it up, it's almost blinding. It's just gorgeous.
Curious, Tom, does the top come off?
Yes, it does. Yeah, So it is a true cup, and there's a little bit of damage to it. It came to us that way, as a 125-year-old item made of metal. Sometimes it's hard to keep these things from getting dinged up with the grandkids messing around in the living room or something like that. But it's still in really wonderful condition and quite a spectacle.
You mentioned that at the bottom, it looks like there's a little bit of an indentation on the right side. Right,
exactly. That's obviously some sort of damage done there. But I love the fact that it's not completely anonymous silver. I mean, there's a baseball player with a bat on it, so it does. It's clearly baseball. There's sometimes you get trophies and it's for a baseball event or a feat, and they don't necessarily have a baseball motif on it, but this one, of course, does.
Tom, do we know how this cup came to the Hall of Fame?
It was donated by I believe it was a member of the family. I think it might have been a son or daughter, maybe another generation down. I can't recall right now, but it was in the family.
Oh, really a beautiful piece. Popularity Trophy Loving Cup that was given to Sam Thompson for the 1895 season of Philadelphia Phillies.
Future Hall of Famer. Future Hall of Famer.
That's right. Hall of Fame outfielder. Here we have a player, not a Hall of Famer, kind of a utility player, but there's a place for utility men in the Hall of Fame. This is interesting. This is a jersey used by a player named Eric Bruntlet back in 2009, and he accomplished one of the rarities for a fielder in baseball.
That's right. This is from the jersey he wore at Citi Field in New York, August 23, 2009, when the Phillies beat the Mets. But it was the jersey that he wore when he made an unassisted triple play to end the game. The only major league unassisted triple play that was also, I guess, do you call it a walk-off then? I don't know what you call it. I have to talk to Dennis Eckersley. He'll come up with a name for it. But it ended the game. But what's really amazing was, listen, that's amazing. That's great. And it's being there in the right place at the right time and doing the right thing. Of course, I don't want to say it's completely random. You've got to be a good ball player to pull it off. But it's a lot of being in the right place at the right time and all the circumstances lining up. But what's really remarkable about it that I think a lot of people forget is Eric Bruntlet had a terrible inning that inning. So he actually, in the top of the ninth, he hit a ball to right center field. So this is when he's up at bat. And Jeff Francoeur makes this diving catch. It's really a very wonderful catch to rob Eric Bruntlet of would have been a triple if it got by him easy. But the second base umpire, Rob Drake, said, no, it's a trap ball. And Bruntlet was all the way on third because Francoeur fell over and was trembling, and he thought that was it. Everything was third out of the inning. And so he sort of held on to the ball, and Bruntlet made it all the way to third. So the umpires got together, and it's not, at that time, it was not reviewable by TV. They just got together and conferred with one another. And they, in fact, did make a change and say, no, it was an out. And actually, if you look at it as a replay, it's not even close. It's just the ump kind of blew it, but the rest of them figured it out. End of inning. So Bruntlet kind of lost a hit there. Then you go to the next inning, and so Angel Pagan gets on base on a Ryan Howard error, and then Luis Castillo comes up for the Mets, and Bruntlet just boots it at second base, and so the runner scores. Angel Pagan scores. Then Daniel Murphy comes up for the Mets, and he hits a grounder up the middle. Bruntlet backhands it and boots it again. Another error. Well, that one wasn't considered an error. They called that a hit, but Bruntlet will tell you he should have caught it. So he's just doing, he's got robbed of a hit. He's essentially made two errors, but now it's first and second. And Jeff Francoeur, of all guys, the guy who robbed Bruntlet, comes up to bat, hits a line drive right up the middle. And Bruntlet was actually playing close to the bag. He basically catches it and touches second at essentially the same time, and then tags the runner at Daniel Murphy coming from first because the runners are off on the pitch to complete the unassisted triple play. So it's really a wonderful example of the highs and lows of baseball in literally in one inning. Yeah. It was just crazy. You never know what's going to happen. And so the unassisted triple play is great, but the full story just makes it that much more fun.
One thing that's interesting to me about these kind of triple plays that so often happen on a line drive, the runners get caught off. But when you catch a line drive on the infield, your first reaction is to throw the ball somewhere. And yet Bruntlet didn't do that. He touched up at second base and then tagged the next runner and was able to execute the unassisted triple play. Otherwise, it would have been an assisted triple play, which is still nice, yeah, but not quite as rare. Kind of an amazing play, and as you said, to end the game, which makes it even a little more theatric.
Yeah.
Tom, I'm curious about the black patch that we see above the Phillies name. HK, that was a memorial. Who was HK?
You know what? It is escaping my memory right now. But if you give me 2 seconds, I'll figure it out for you because I have that ability.
I was trying to remember who that was, and
oh, you know who it was? You know who it was? I remember now. It's Harry Kalas. Harry Kalas passed away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But regarding the play itself, like I said, when Bruntlet moved to his right, ever just a few feet to catch a liner, which of course is your first instinct, it's the momentum. Really, doesn't take any thought at all. The momentum was taking him onto the bag. Although I knew he knows what he was doing. It's not at that point the runner from second is out. He didn't turn his attention to the runner because that guy's running to third base. He's off on the pitch, and then you turn around to assess, well, what's up with Daniel Murphy? But he knew that Daniel Murphy was off on the pitch because one of the reasons he got a good break towards the bag was that if the ball wasn't hit, there might have been a play to throw down to second, or maybe the ball would have been a fake throw to second because you don't want the run to score or whatever. But the other thing is, the guy's professional, so he knows what he's doing. He knows the situation. The wacky thing is that that's one of the last games that Eric Bruntlet ever played in the major leagues. I mean, he played 12 more games that season, and then he was briefly in the World Series, and that was the end of his major league career.
Tom, one final question on the Bruntlet jersey. There is a patch toward the lower part, right side of the uniform. What is that patch?
Let me zoom in on my screen here, and I can tell you. Oh, it's just a manufacturer's patch. So the manufacturers put their name there, and that's just the point is it's almost always hidden because the players have their shirt tails tucked in.
Yeah.
But it's and the nice thing about it is you often would have, in the old days, you'd have the manufacturer's name in the neck, but now there's no scratchiness in the neck. it's on the tail, and it will cause no problems there.
It says authentic, right?
I can't even remember who the manufacturer is. I think it is authentic, and that's right.
Yeah. Very good. So Eric Bruntlet's jersey used to pull off that unassisted triple play back in 2009. We still have one more team, two more artifacts to do. So let's head from Philadelphia to the champions of 2019, the Nationals of Washington. Here we have a cap from 2016 belonging to a pretty good right-hand pitcher, Max Scherzer.
You are correct. And this is from May 11th, 2016, when Scherzer struck out 20 guys in one game. So now we had a Tom Seaver 19 strikeout game in 1970, and you fast forward, 46 years, and you get Max Scherzer striking out 20 members of the Tigers that tied a 9-inning record. And the wacky thing is that Scherzer almost lost that game. Obviously, if you striking out a lot of guys, you're in the strike zone. So he had given up a run. It was 3-1 actually when in the seventh, Danny Espinosa hit a home run to push the lead to 3-1 for the Nats. But in the top of the ninth, Scherzer's sitting on 18 strikeouts, and the first pitch to JD Martinez left the ballpark. So nobody on base, thankfully for for Washington. But the Tigers, Martinez hits a solo homer to cut the lead to 3-2. And then actually, after striking out Miguel Cabrera for his 19th strikeout, Victor Martinez, who was a wonderful, I think he's an underrated hitter. I think he was just a joy to watch. Great hitter. He singles. And now with 19 Ks, he got a man on first. And Scherzer's one swing away from a tie, or I guess actually theoretically one swing away from giving up the lead. But he held on. He struck out Justin Upton for his 20th K, and he had a shot at 21. But James McCann grounded out to end the game. But quite an exciting game for many reasons.
You look at the cap, and it bears some similarity to the Seaver cap that we saw earlier. Made of wool. You can see the stitching along the bill. Again, the beautiful insignia that really has a nice offset, the white against the bright red.
Hey, Bruce,
Used by the Washington Nationals.
you know why they do the stitching across the bill?
No.
So there's stitches there. So they didn't used to do that, but if you've got to have something solid in there, right? And it used to be a sort of a cardboard material or something sort of like that. But they'd get seams there to make sure that that cardboard, if it got wet or damaged in any way, it still managed to retain its shape within that the textile. So you can imagine if you didn't have those seams, that inner structure could move around and become real problematic. So if you have seams there, it actually makes the structure more durable. So that's why they're there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, a cap like this is an event we could not anticipate. It's not a milestone 3,000th career strikeout. It's not a World Series event where we already have a representative from the Hall of Fame there. So in a situation like this, how do we typically acquire an artifact? We don't know that history is going to be made on a certain night. What do we do?
We very nicely ask. That's what it amounts to. Sometimes some of these unforeseen objects are events where the team knows that we're interested in it. So it would be basically any no-hitter or a what else? If a guy does an unassisted triple play, they're gonna guess that we're gonna ask. If it's something that we can see coming, we're following somebody around because they might get their 3,000th hit or an important home run, milestone home run, Cal Ripken breaking Lou Gehrig's record. You can kind of see it coming. We're asking as well there. And as we've talked about before, these are always asks. We're not telling anybody to give us something. We're just asking because we're not part of Major League Baseball. We're just making a request to preserve history. And the Major League teams are wonderful about this. They understand why it's important to have the Hall of Fame do this, to preserve the history of the game and their team, quite frankly. So yes, I'm sure we may have called up when he was at 16, 17, 18 strikeouts maybe, saying, hey, heads up, we would be interested in something. And the teams in general are very cooperative, which is a wonderful relationship to have.
Another Washington Nationals pitcher represented with our final artifact of the program. This is from the 2019 World Series. So we did have a representative there. We had a sense that some history could be made. The pitcher, Steven Strasburg, the situation, Game 6, Washington Nationals, Houston Astros.
Right. So great moment for the Nationals. They're down 3-2 in the World Series against the Astros. And this is, that's a year and a half ago, 2019, a little less than a year and a half ago. And they're in Houston, back against the wall, and they hand the ball to Strasburg, who is having a fantastic postseason. And he went 8 1/3 innings. I mean, he just did everything everything you could ask for. He gave up 2 runs in a shaky first inning. That first inning, I remember watching that thinking, wow, I wonder how long the leash is going to be for Strasburg, because he gave up 2 runs. It did not look great. He had a wild pitch in that inning. He just didn't have it really. But he got out of it just giving up 2 runs, and then he just went on a tear. He was completely unhittable essentially after that. So they win the game 7-2, send the game to the World Series to the 7th game. It was his. He got the victory. He was 5-0 in the postseason. He had like a sub-2 ERA. Struck out 47. Let me get the numbers right here. 47 batters in just over 36 innings pitched. He was very, very dominant, and he won the World Series MVP. Just a magnificent performance for a really fun team.
One of the things that stands out, Tom, about this jersey, all the logos. On the left sleeve is the Washington Nationals logo, but then on the right side, you see the World Series logo. Is that removable, or is that a permanent thing?
Actually, it's funny that you should ask about that, because when they started adding logos for postseason and specifically the World Series, they were iron-on and often sewn on. More recently, they have these sort of, they actually often have a very reflective look to them, more plasticky,
Yeah.
and they are sticky. So they have a sticky substance. But I got to tell you that the sticky substance is not spectacular. And you'll find some where they've come off in mid-game, or they're peeling off if you pay close attention. So they're a little bit problematic, actually. I kind of wish they would go back to sewing them on. There's more effort to that. I get that. But from a posterity's sake, I think it would be a good move to do that. But I believe that one, I have to check in particular, but I believe that one is one that's a stick-on. But it's kind of sad they kind of went that direction.
This artifact would have been brought back to the Hall of Fame by John Shestakovsky of our Public Relations and Communications Department. I remember when it arrived back in the fall of 2019. Tom, where is this artifact on exhibit?
Another one in the Autumn Glory. I picked a lot of World Series related objects, so this one is an Autumn Glory. But if you do the starting 9, for every team we chose 9 artifacts, and it's ones that are sort of must sees. We just listen. Every team has more than 9 artifacts on exhibit in the museum. It's a big museum, but we also wanted to make sure that we spread them out. So it's not like you're going to get 9 artifacts of the Nationals and they're all in one place. We wanted to make sure that if you just wanted to follow that one team and use your little sheet to walk around the museum, you'll see most of the museum anyway. So as it turns out, the 10 that I picked today, was maybe half of them were in Autumn Glory.
I forgot to ask you about the Scherzer cap. Is that one for the books or somewhere else?
Actually, the Scherzer cap is in one for the books. We have a number of caps from 19 and 20 strikeout games.
Very good. So that is our 10th and final artifact as we complete our trip around the National League East, all 5 teams represented. Next time we'll do this will be in a couple of weeks. We will have a different curator with us, Gabrielle Augustine, and I believe she'll be looking at the American League Central, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. And just as an FYI, speaking of Gabrielle, she gave me a heads up that this is the wonder of modern technology, Bruce. I believe there's an artifact that I was talking about, which was the where am I here? I want to make sure I get the right one. I think it's the Strasburg jersey is going to be moved. So I had it in Autumn Glory, but it is actually going to be found in the Nationals case in the exhibit Your Team Today on our 3rd floor. So we're moving it, still on exhibit, just in a different location than it was earlier this year.
Tom, before we let you go, we did have one question on the chat that I wanted to answer. It's from one of our regular viewers, Glinda Perat. Glinda wants to know, did the Hall of Fame ask for anything or get anything from Bill Buckner in 1986? Of course, he had a very tough moment. He was a guy who handled it, though, with a lot of class. Did we ever get anything from Bill Buckner for that game that you recall?
We did not. And really, the focus was more on what the Mets did and not, a downside to one individual player who had a great, an incredible career.
Yeah.
And was, very hampered by bad ankles. I mean, in that World Series, and probably shouldn't have been out there at that point, which is common for them to come out in the innings for a defensive replacement. But that was an unfortunate. I'm not saying I'm rooting against the Mets or for the Red Sox. I'm just saying it's always a bummer when something like that happens because it's tough on a ball player. But I do want to mention this.
The Hall of Fame, when we look for artifacts, we tend to ask for artifacts from positive moments of glory, either individual glory or team glory. It's a little more problematic to approach a player who, whether it's fair or unfair, has been called the GOAT of the game, the GOAT of the series, what have you. We tend not to ask those players for artifacts unless they're extremely gracious and come forward and say, would you like something?
Well, yeah. For every great moment, there's a tragic moment in baseball. It all balances out. There's different ways to tell stories, and you could tell it through the lens of the dramatic negative. But yeah, we tend to talk about the positive part, and which doesn't mean we're trying to sugarcoat anything. I mean, we talk a lot about how there's that balance. But I do want to mention one thing about Bill Buckner, who, it's connected to the Ray Knight helmet, but he's also connected to the Hank Aaron 715th home run, because Bill Buckner was in left field when that home run was hit, and he climbs up the fence, and actually a part of Vin Scully's call is calling out Buckner on that play. He says, it's a high line drive to center field. Buckner goes back to the fence. It's gone. And that was Bill Buckner to the very end trying to make a catch. He's a winner. The guy's a winner.
The ball was a good 10 feet over his head, but he did everything he could to get to the top of that wall. If there was any chance of making the catch, Bill Buckner was going to give it a full effort. One thing that we should mention, this is not just for Bill Buckner, but this is for any player. If you go to our website, baseballhall.org, and go to our digital collection, you can actually do searches, and you can find a variety of different artifacts. Could be anything from a bobblehead to a photograph to some kind of a three-dimensional artifact like a glove or a bat or a helmet. And that's something fans can do. You can go to digital collection at the Hall of Fame website, and you can do searches for different players and find out about some of the artifacts that we have. They might not necessarily be artifacts currently on exhibit, but they are artifacts that would be in our collection. Tom, as always, we thank you for the time over the last hour. We do really appreciate your insights. Good job. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm off to another meeting.
All right. We'll let you go, Tom.
Take care,
As we
everybody.
get set to wrap up the show, we do thank Tom. We also thank our sponsor, the Ford Motor Company, their generous support of these virtual Curator Spotlights, along with all of our other programs as well. Speaking of our other programs, I want to mention that coming up this Thursday, just 2 days from now, that's January 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we are going to have a virtual Legends of the Game program. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk to a member of the Hall of Fame's Board of Directors, Thomas Tull. Thomas Tull is a longtime baseball fan. At one time, he was the head of Legendary Entertainment. They were the movie company that put out such great films as The Dark Knight Rises. From a baseball standpoint, they were the company that put out the great movie 42. And Thomas Tull was the producer of that film. We're going to talk about 42. We're going to talk about the late Chadwick Boseman. We'll talk about Tom's interest in baseball and in the Hall of Fame, his role with the Board of Directors. Again, that's coming up on Thursday, January 28th, and that is at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you go to our website, you can register. It is a free program, but registration is required. We thank you for joining us today here at the Baseball Hall of Fame. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care now.